Psst. I'm in a good mood. I should explain something to the voices in my head again. But what? Stop! Who are you? Are you kidding me? I look exactly like you. Take a freaking guess. I came from the future to warn you. Don't make a video about time travel. Don't. You're me from the future? That's so cool. But there's loads of problems with that. No, stop. The term time travel is actually not particularly referring to what you have in mind. When you think about time travel, you think about movies like Back to the Future, Terminator, or The Time Machine, real classics. But the travel in time is actually not that difficult. In fact, you're traveling in time right now. Yes, look at you, you're a time traveler, traveling to the future exactly 1 second every second. So cool. No. Stop talking, this is going to end badly. So badly you have to travel back in time to warn yourself about not listening to the time travel. Wait, I'm not... It gets a little more exciting than that. It turns out traveling to the future is super easy. You do it every day, whenever you sleep. I mean, that does require you not to spend all night watching weird YouTube videos and to actually try to be alone with your thoughts for once. When you sleep, you lose consciousness and wake up hopefully about 8 hours later. That's basically traveling to the future. Really, how much more complicated does it need to get? Want to go 1,000 years into the future? Just conveniently trip into a cryo chamber and wake up in the desired time. Traveling to the future is super easy and is done basically every time you lose consciousness. The only thing that makes it special and science fiction-y is actually getting back to your own time. But more about that later. Remember the 1895 novella The Time Machine by Herbert George Wells? According to my 5-minute Google search, it's apparently where the term time machine first came from and where the idea of time travel was first popularized. Pretty neat, huh? The more you know. Anyway, it was adapted into a movie in 1960 called H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, and I watched that movie solely for research on this video. I'm such a good YouTuber, aren't I? No, I just watched the movie because my history teacher recommended it, and I mean, I liked it, apart from the less modern representation of women in the film that was normal at the time. But there was this one tiny thing that stuck into my mind after having seen it, which is, the time machine in this story makes 0 sense. Now, excuse me if I didn't read something that was made over a century ago just to check if that plot hole was resolved in there, but I'm going to proceed to talk about the movie, the 1960 one. Apparently it had a remake in 2002, but I'm not talking about that one. I haven't even watched it. Yeah, suck it. Maybe it solves all of those problems, but it doesn't matter because I'm just using this as an example. Basically, the way time travel works in that movie is this really fancy looking chair thing, and when a time traveler wishes to embark on this totally not women objectifying adventure, he simply sits in said chair, turns a lever, and then time speeds up.
To see the sun arc in less than a minute.
To see a snail race by.
I see a snail race by. Yeah, you're very enthusiastic, but I'm pretty sure snails can move a bit faster than this distance in what is supposedly an entire day. Wow. I've waited for years to get that off my chest. Anyway, basically the premise is that time will start moving quicker and quicker around you while you're protected in your epic gaming chair. Eventually you simply stop the machine and continue on your normal pace of time. I'll give you half a second to guess what's wrong with that. Too slow, I'll explain it. In the movie, when someone uses the time machine, from an outside perspective it simply disappears. But why does it do that? Is it invisible? Because it's still there. The only thing the time machine does is make your perception of time slower in comparison. All it should do is make you really slow when sitting inside the chair, making everyone very weirded out. What should really happen to our beloved time traveler is that he notices people start building a museum around him as he speeds up in time, because literally everything it supposedly does is make him quicker in time. It doesn't cause him to turn invisible magically. What's more, that machine should in no way be able to protect you from, let's say, an air raid. You would just explode, like everyone else. So, no way. This makes no sense. I can see why the general interpretation of the term time travel changed from actual travel to more like a teleportation in time, since this, while really cool, is completely nonsensical if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. When things start really turning into problems when you travel back, this brings so many issues with it. So it's a good thing it's not possible in real life. We can still think about it though. Think about all the ways you could break the universe this way. Firstly, there's the grandfather paradox. You might have heard of it because it's one of the most famous issues with time travel. The name derives from the act of murdering one's own grandfather, which is rude, but remember this is a hypothetical grandfather. These guys don't really mind getting murdered. So I travel back in time before me or my parents were born and I kill my own grandfather. What happens? Well, my grandfather would never have created my mother and my mother would never have created me, so I never exist. Except, if I never exist, I never travel back in time to kill my own grandfather. So, he's still alive, and therefore, I'm still alive, and I kill him. But then, yeah, it's a paradox. It doesn't just have to be anything with your grandfather, it can be anything that either directly or indirectly causes you to go back in time. Like preventing things from ever happening. If those problems never emerged, I would have never traveled back in time to fix them, and we're stuck in that loop again. There's no solution to this problem. Except there is. With another fancy sci-fi thing we could utilize, the multiverse. This is not a DC multiverse, more like a Rick and Morty one. Hypothetically, when I travel back in time, I instantly create a parallel universe in which my grandfather has died. In this alternate timeline, I will not exist. But that's not me. That's me. That's a different me. A different me who's dead. Well, I mean, never existed in the first place. I'm from another universe, so everything I perceive as a change in the timeline in my universe is actually just a separate reality from the other one. It's completely identical to the old one. I mean, old is kind of a useless term since time doesn't... Except for that one moment where a panda that really hates his own grandfather decided to express his malicious intent in less peaceful ways. That and everything that is caused and or prevented by this event. But the fact that there's no one to travel back in time and cause this event to happen in the first place doesn't matter, and is therefore not affected by the timeline of this one, which means a solution to the grandfather paradox. But let's say if someone else tries to travel back in time to that moment where my grandfather was killed, he won't change his current timeline, he will create a brand new one, where he kills me and my grandfather is traumatized for life. In this reality, I will exist, but this me is a different me than the other me is. This can result in another loop where the me creates a new timeline by killing his own grandfather, and the anonymous grandfather-loving hero creates a new one by preventing me from ever killing him. But again, he's not really preventing it, he's just creating an alternate timeline in which he does. So, this may cause a loop and create a timeline creation spiral where the crowd of murderers and saviors keeps ever expanding. There's no paradox involved, but it gets really messy. Not impossible, though. This is why the time travel system of Back to the Future is so stupid. Yeah, screw you and your childhood. They simultaneously use this solution, but don't at the same time. Marty starts gradually disappearing, which is super dumb, not only because of the grandfather paradox, but also because erasing an entire timeline doesn't take time. This is time. Our feeble human brains comprehend it as a linear existence, but on this scale, the past, present, and future are all constant. The grandfather paradox wouldn't take any time to settle in because time as we know it doesn't matter anymore. Past, present, and future are all the same on the scale of time travel, which is what causes the paradox in the first place. The reason this loop breaks the universe so much is because of this. If you travel back in time to kill your own grandfather, how does the timeline go? But they don't even listen to their own nonsensical rules because the main character has a photo that is affected instantly. If you're going to make a movie about time travel, you're obviously going to have to gloss over some laws of physics since time travel isn't possible, but when you do that, at least stay consistent to your own rules. Yeah, I remember getting really angry about that, and I remember future me saying that he remembers that, and I'm never going to change anything, am I? You're currently suffering from the destiny solution to the grandfather paradox. It relies on the fact that time is less flexible than previously thought, and the time traveler cannot change anything. I named it like that because destiny is the idea of fate controlling your entire life and that nothing you can do can change it, which is even more of a philosophical thing than what we're doing right now. Maybe I'll feel like making a more subjective video where I talk about the meaning of life, but now, from now on, when I say destiny, I'm not talking about some divine greater will, we're only using a big, healthy mixture of science, philosophy, and a dangerously big ego here. With destiny, I mean the solution to the grandfather paradox for you as a time traveler, or if you want to get technical, a time teleporter, have already experienced the repercussions of your time teleport adventure. Again, past, present, future, all the same thing. Like how you, no matter how hard you try, cannot do anything against me eventually turning into you, because that is what already happened from your point of view. The timeline is this thing that goes a certain way, and time travel, time teleport, just makes looking at it a bit more complicated, but doesn't change anything from this perspective. So I travel back in time, I have to intend to murder my grandfather, but I cannot possibly succeed because otherwise I would never exist. So either I trip and die, or I change my mind and decide to leave, but whatever happens, it somehow exactly leads up to that point in time where I travel back. I wanted to mention this because it's used as a solution to paradoxes in media sometimes, but it's not as nice as the multiverse one. Okay, side note, going a bit meta here. There's a few problems with the Destiny solution, or apparently officially called the Predestination Paradox, I'm going to explain now. But as far as I found, no one has ever said these things, which is improbable, but they're still original thoughts. I might be completely super mega wrong here, so take this stuff with an even higher concentration of salt than the other things I've been saying. If you have an opinion about something in this video, you can send me a letter by mail, which will take a few months to arrive through Wait, what? There's this feature underneath the video where you can say anything you want in seconds, and there's this button that allows you to see whenever I post a new video. But how have I never noticed that? Well, whichever method of communication you prefer. So, firstly, if this is the case, I can't kill my grandfather because otherwise I wouldn't have existed to do it in the first place. Fine. But who is going to stop me exactly? The only thing the universe can throw at me is a coincidence that murders me, but if time teleporters have the intent of murder in their mind, this is not going to hold up for long. Someone is eventually not going to accidentally trip and die while trying to cause a paradox. This solution is kind of like, yeah, but there's no paradox if you never travel back in time in the first place. But that's not the point. Remember, we're assuming destiny in the most scientific way possible. There's no time police that stops people from creating paradoxes. Although, it does in some pieces of fiction, which, nicely done guys, you're thinking ahead. Well, in the case that there isn't a time police, with a bit of planning, I can just murder my grandfather without much resistance. Some pieces of fiction have a thing where if you mess with time, time messes back. And those coincidences are a result of the Destiny solution having its own will of some sorts, where those coincidences always stop you from creating a paradox, no matter what you try. But generally, without a TVA, this isn't holding up. But even if we ignore that problem, there's a second one that's even more glaring. Humans are sloppy. Really sloppy. They're famously awful at following instructions, even with the best intentions, which brings a problem with it. This guy, for example. This guy had been here the whole time. Yeah. Hi. I've given up on saving you now, because I remember everything you're doing right now, and I remember not doing anything against my future self, so it's basically useless. Exactly. This guy currently remembers the exact thing I'm experiencing right now, in which his future self tried to warn him, but failed. Only this time, he remembers that his future self had failed, and, after a failed attempt at convincing me, realized that the solution to the grandfather paradox is not the nice one, which will cause him to give up and make something different, which is still influencing time and causes the pesky paradox again. So this one is messier. Okay, so you might have understood that, but it may also have been a little confusing, so let me rephrase it a bit. I'm Peam A. He is Peam B. After the events of this explanation, Peam A turns into Peam B and travels back in time to cause those events and create the Destiny solution. With me so far? So Peam B, from his time of being Peam A, remembers Peam B saying these exact things and going for the exact same thought process. But, as a sloppy meatbag, cannot possibly mimic his Peam B's exact interactions. He won't remember some words, he'll say things at the wrong moment or wrong tempo, anything like that. This is because this Peam B remembers the experiences from the events in the video and observed them. He's thought about it, learned from it, and became a slightly different person, which made it impossible to coincidentally say and think the exact same things as his Peam B, even if he wanted to. Organisms, unlike robots, learn even when they don't want to. So they can't create the same situation as they had experienced from Peam A's perspective, because they're no longer the same Peam B as they had met. And even the slightest change in the timeline results in the total destruction of the Destiny solution, because it relies solely on there being no possible way to change anything. From the top of my head, this problem only emerges when interacting with your future self in some direct or indirect way. But if there is some way to defeat the Destiny solution, it is completely flawed. Remember, it relies on the fact that the timeline is impenetrable and eternal. If you can change it, even with the slightest amount, everything falls apart. Now, for those of you somehow able to persevere through my horrible lack of portraying the thoughts in my head accurately, you might realize that another paradox pops up here. If the events of the video get initialized by my future self, Peam B, who in turn is only here because he had experienced the same thing, Where did this whole loop come from? Well, you and I are not the only ones that asked themselves this question. I looked it up and apparently this is called the Bootstrap Paradox. Strangely, time paradox about interacting with your future self and creating information or matter with no traceable origin gave me exactly what I was looking for. Also, what the frick is a bootstrap? Well, apparently it means the means to advance oneself and accomplish something. Why are people with a degree so bad at naming things? Okay, to properly explain the shoelace paradox, we're going to have to get really basic. I am walking down the street, and suddenly, from nowhere, a ball gets thrown in my face. I don't know where it came from, I don't know who owns it, I just know that someone threw a ball in my face. Then, I decide to take that ball with me, go to my time machine, travel back in time, and ultimately be the one throwing that ball in my own face. Which is how I eventually manage to get that ball, and which is how I give it to myself, which is how I get it thrown in my face, which is how I get it, which is how I travel. Where did that ball come from? At some point, someone must have gotten their hands on it in any other means and thrown it at their past self, which started the cycle. But if that situation in which I buy the ball doesn't exist anymore, I couldn't have ever gotten a hold of it. But I mean, this is a bit of a dumb problem, really just a variation of the grandfather paradox. A way this could have happened is, I buy the ball, I travel back in time, create a new reality in which I throw it at my past self. This second person, the alternate timeline one, then creates another reality in which he travels back in time to go throw that ball in someone's face. Except, then you meet yourself. That's the problem with this. So I thought about this for a while, and I came up with a way it could technically work. Except it extended this video's length up to half an hour. Since you're probably either way more advanced in this subject than I am, or completely confused out of your mind, let me just quickly summarize it and brush it off through the tears that came from having written all those pages of script for nothing. To prevent meeting yourself, you need a special quantum fluctuating super nano time machine that replaces anyone inside the time machine at the point you want to travel to. This way, no alternate selves crowd up and make it messy. With this less ethical method, you can create the Bootstrap Paradox. Sort of. Obviously, this is not technically what's happening here, it's just exploiting the issue with the multiverse solution en masse. But from the perspective of any witnessing human, this is an infinite loop. It can go on forever, murdering infinite amounts of clones just so you can play catch with yourself. You know what the scariest / coolest thing is? A person in the timeline has no way of knowing in which timeline they are. For all they know, they could have murdered gazillions of versions of themselves already, or been the second one in the cycle. There is no way to know. Unless the initial maniac who started all of this had the idea to communicate that with his alternate selves. If that's the case, we genuinely just broke the multiverse solution. You'll create an infinite amount of timelines, like some weird programming error that loops in on itself. If there was a time police, they would really hate their jobs because of you. Now, finally having finished our journey into the paradoxes of time travel, I need to warn you young adventurers about the other dangers of it, like physics. You know, the realistic stuff. Let me breeze through them real quick to not bore you to death. Number 1, if you teleport 3 days back in time, but 3 days ago that was the location someone else was standing exactly, matter will briefly exist in the same place simultaneously, which, I mean, I'm not a physicist, but I'm guessing that either this breaks some natural law, or we just explode in a puddle of organs. Either way, it's messy. Number 2, you have a muffin. Even with the first solution of the grandfather paradox, you were able to create infinite muffins just by some clever tricks. Set it on the table, wait, I don't know, a minute, and then grab it. Step in your time machine and travel a minute back in time. Before you grab the muffin from the table, you then have 2 muffins, 2 time machines, and 2 yous. You just effectively created matter, and I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to be possible. Unless you consider those parallel universes to be matter that, like the matter in our universe, has always existed. But even if with clever wording it somehow doesn't break the universe, you can still get infinite muffins this way, and I guess that's a win. Number 3. Space is big. Earth is spinning around its own axis while orbiting the sun, while the sun is orbiting a black hole in the middle of the galaxy, while that galaxy is moving because of the expansion of the universe. If you teleport even a second back in time, you'll be very far away from your original location. I mean, relatively. You'll still be in the exact same point in space, which is now in the middle of nowhere, and you'll freeze to death if you're not asphyxiated yet. In conclusion, time travel is weird. It's funky, it's wobbly, it's hard to comprehend. Don't take me seriously whatsoever because I'm just a panda on the internet again. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that I'm glad it isn't possible. The only time travel you'll ever be able to do is what you've been used to for your entire life. Man, this video was just annoying. I should travel to the past and warn myself never to make it. Yeah, you should. Hey, you know what? Have my glasses. Wow, they're fancy. I've been meaning to ask, actually. We're in the infinite abyss devoid of life. Where'd you get them? Calculated genocide of an infinite number of past versions of me. Neat. Bye now.
Bye-bye.